All right, so AEW Full Gear 2024. Going into this show, I saw very little hype, including from the AEW diehards. There's been a lot of people who have been talking about how this is the weakest card on paper that AEW's ever put out for a pay-per-view. I have to think about their other pay-per-views, but I certainly can understand putting this in, the category, for sure. I have to really think back. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, even if that's the case, the show will be fine because the talent goes out there and always kind of makes it worth it. And I have to tell you that on this show, there's a lot of things about this show that did not work for me. There's a lot of things about this show that I had issues with. And I'm not sure if it's wrestling fatigue. I'm not sure if it's AEW fatigue. I know that there's been other podcasters, and I've been listening to them talk about how, there's a lot of wrestling out there. WWE is right now still having their 3 big shows, and then you've got Collision, which I don't know anybody in my circle of friends who actually watches Collision. Rampage, which has become like a C show, and then of course Dynamite, and even that show is kind of not getting viewership. And the thing that's weird about this era of AEW is that they are trying new things, or at least new old things, because they're clearly doing an NWO ripoff with the Death Riders, and obviously Darby Allin is Sting, except a little bit more hardcore. They're even doing the thing where Darby comes down from the ceiling. They even did that on a Dynamite recently, like Sting. So it's clear that the direction they're going in is Darby Allin winning the title from Jon Moxley. And as of right now, I don't care. I don't care about that. I don't think Darby Allin's a good, logical world champion. I have no problem with Darby. I don't think he's a horrible wrestler or anything like that. It's just that I don't buy him as being a world champion. And this story of the Death Riders taking over, the company is just AEW's bootleg version of the NWO. It feels that way. They were even doing things with vehicular attacks. Like tonight, the show ended with Darby Allin crashing his car into the car of the Death Riders. They're really going back to the well of the Monday Night War. And the thing is, I'll be honest, I'm not even totally against this idea because they need to try something new. But it's not working. And I think the reason why it's not working is because they have a very, very big roster. And I think that Tony Khan and the creative team is in some ways very overwhelmed by all the talent they have. And so they have a big roster. They have a lot of titles that really don't mean much except for a couple of them. And not enough TV time. So they try to cram in a lot of stories. And it just doesn't really work because not enough stories get fleshed out. For some reason, the shows just don't feel, they don't feel like they flow. And this pay-per-view kind of suffered from that. Now, there was good matches on this show. There was good talent. But the show really was a disappointment in comparison to previous AEW shows, in my opinion. AEW always puts on big pay-per-views. At the same time, though, one of the issues with this pay-per-view, because they always do good pay-per-views, is that this pay-per-view was very long. This was a 5-hour pay-per-view. I started watching at 7, the 0 hour. I think it was at 7 o'clock, and it went all the way to around midnight. And I know that AEW historically has done 4-hour big pay-per-views. The problem is that right now the company's not hot. The drawing is they're not drawing people to the buildings. The TV shows don't feel full. The crowd does not really feel like they're into anything, and the company feels very, very cold. And when you have a situation where the company feels cold, when you have a long show like this, the crowd ends up getting tired. You have to remember, some of these people are commuting in. They don't live in Newark, New Jersey. They live in other places, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, New York in some cases. They're coming in. Some are flying in. So these long shows, I don't think that the length of this show was justified. The thing about this show is that you cannot justify a show this long with what you presented. If they're going to do a 5-hour pay-per-view, it has to be a complete banger, and I don't think this was. They opened up with Private Party. Now, there was stuff on the pre-show, like the QT Marshall against the Big Boom AJ. That was more of a... I mean, I enjoyed that because it was really goofy. It was a very basic match, and it was all done for comedy. That's more of a sort of thinking outside the box thing, which I appreciate. But the actual pay-per-view, Private Party versus the Outrunners, the Kings of the Black Throne, and the Acclaimed for the AEW World Tag Team titles. The Outrunners are starting to get over, but the opposite's happening to the Acclaimed. It feels like the Acclaimed now are very cold. Private Party got the big win over the Young Bucks on television, but it didn't feel like that big of a win. They're the tag team champions now, finally. This was a decent match, but none of these teams are teams that I really care about, and I feel like they're teasing a split between Anthony Bowens and Max Caster just based on the way they were behaving, and so that might be a story, but the issue with this show is I just didn't really care, and I'm just being honest. Like, this match, they went out there and did cool stuff, right? No argument there. They always do cool stuff, but it didn't matter to me who won. And the whole show had this problem. MJF and Roderick Strong. So this match, I just knew going in that it was going to end up with MJF winning and Adam Cole coming out, setting up their match for World's End. And I knew that because at World's End last year is when Adam Cole betrayed MJF. So they're going to have like a 1 year sort of a bookend, kind of like what they did with Jon Moxley and Orange Cassidy. However, that's exactly what happened. Now, the match between MJF and Roderick Strong was good. Should have been on later in the card, and it should have been shorter. It really felt like a main event from Dynamite. Not a bad match by any means. It's just Roderick Strong is kind of a quasi-heel here, even though he was a babyface in this match. MJF is doing his MJF isms and barely showing up, and it's like the same thing over again. The people were just very quiet during this. Like, it just didn't feel like a match people cared about, and it was an obvious, like, it just felt like a TV match. In many ways, Full Gear felt like a longer Dynamite, in many ways. We then had Mercedes Moné and Chris Statlander. I gotta give it to them. They really did try hard. They really did try hard, man. Mercedes is not really connecting. She's a heel now, which is better for her. But then you have Chris Statlander, who just turned heel like 3 months ago and is now a babyface again for some reason. And that confuses people. It's the same thing with MJF and Adam Cole. Like, you're doing the same feud in reverse, and they're trying so hard to have it make sense so that we actually get behind Adam Cole and get behind what he did to MJF by lying and doing the whole devil thing. But it's not working. Like, AEW is trying things and it's not working. And here's the thing. The thing that makes it so strange is that even some of the AEW diehards are starting to not care. Like, I was talking to a few of them today, people who are ride or die AEW, including some people who don't even watch WWE. Like, there's fans out there that only watch AEW and New Japan, and even they thought that this card was poorly built up and they didn't care. They still watched it, but they didn't care. With this Mercedes Statlander match, like, we knew that Chris Statlander was not going to win the title. It just sort of felt like they were just taking up a lot of time, and it should have had the match time should have been shaved. I don't think the Mercedes project is working. Jay White and Hangman Adam Page was the first match that I thought was actually a solid one. Their feud, I'm not really into this feud, to be honest, because again, Jay White had been a heel for so long. It just sort of, the turns in AEW happen just sporadically to build to matches without actually making sense. And it's happened a lot lately. MJF, Adam Cole, Chris Statlander, they're all over the show. You know, when you do a heel turn or a babyface turn, they work most effectively when they make sense. Case in point, Kevin Owens. He's mad at Cody. They had a phenomenal segment on SmackDown. He's mad at Cody because Kevin Owens battled the Bloodline for like a year, over a year, and then Cody teams up with Roman. Like, I get it. I get where Kevin's coming from, but in AEW, because Tony wants to book a good match, he'll just turn somebody without actually feeling out the story. And that's become a recurring problem this year with AEW. It's never felt this cold. I'm happy they got a new TV deal, but it's never felt this cold. Now, back to the match. The match was good. Jay White defeated Adam Page. And I'm over here thinking, okay, well, that's the end of the feud. Maybe not, because this pay-per-view had one of the strangest endings to a pay-per-view I've ever seen. And you could tell the crowd either didn't care or were just extremely tired. These long pay-per-views are okay when you were running 4 pay-per-views a year. But AEW is running about 10 to 12 now, or 10 to 11 now. a year, which is almost monthly, you need to really, really like fix that. You need to cut down on the time. Now, I'm not saying to go to WWE's formula where you're having 5-match cards, but give me a nice 8-9 match card, have it be 3 hours, 3.5 hours, and I'm happy with that. And AEW always offers up a buffet table, and that's why their shows are so good. But this show just felt very same. Then we had Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay. This was a good match because it's Will Ospreay, and his typical best match of the month is Will Ospreay. And it's a Will Ospreay match. What can I tell you? It was great. I mean, he's a phenomenal athlete. He's brilliant when it comes to coming up with spots. But I did have a major problem with this, and you've heard me rant about this before in other videos if you've been watching my wrestling reviews. Kyle Fletcher does a tombstone pile driver from the apron to the steel steps on the outside. I have talked in the past about how moves like the pile driver and the tombstone pile driver, those need to be heavy, heavy moves. Anything where you're getting dropped on top of your head. Because of the danger of those moves, which is funny because WWE just did an angle where Kevin Owens powerbombed Randy Orton and he's on the shelf now. So even they're kind of bringing back the fear of the power bomb. The pile driver, not the pile driver. And I see this, and it wasn't the finish. And they did the same thing a couple years ago at Full Gear when MJF beat Mox. There was a tombstone on the apron like that. When you drop somebody on the top of their head like that, it's lights out. And it wasn't even the finish. Those things piss me off. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm in the minority. Maybe I'm old school. But it just doesn't. It makes everything else feel meaningless. Now, Kyle Fletcher won. And they built this up as being the biggest win of Kyle's career because he's also a guy who recently turned heel. And he's also a guy with Don Callis who hates Will Ospreay. They've been feuding for a while. The story, of course, is that him and Will were friends at one time, very close friends. And Kyle Fletcher's like kind of repackaged himself. He's cut his hair. He's way more muscular. So I give him credit for trying. I do give Kyle Fletcher a lot of credit because he's trying to get repackaged. He's trying to become a star. And him beating Will Ospreay is the right move to make him a star. Will it work though? Will it work? That is the question. It may not happen right away because Takeshita did some good stuff too, and it was a little while before he caught on. So I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I do feel like him winning was definitely a very selfless move on Will Ospreay's part, and I think that Will eventually get his win back, obviously, but I like the fact that he won. Daniel Garcia and Jack Perry, I don't understand why they're still pushing Daniel Garcia. They have tried with this guy now for 3 years. He doesn't get over. The best thing he did was that MJF feud 2 months ago, I think it was. Or maybe it was last month. No, it was 2 months ago. It was All Out. And even that, it just didn't work. Daniel Garcia, to me, they've been trying so hard with him, and people are just not accepting him as a top guy. So he wins the TNT title from Jack Perry, and they build it up as a big moment. And here's the thing. It would have been a big moment if the TNT title was actually prestigious. It's not. I've talked about this before. And by the way, WWE has the same problem. This is not an AEW issue. There are too many championships. WWE, AEW, New Japan. There's too many belts. They're not different enough. You know, when you've got trios titles and tag titles and things like that, fine. AEW has 4 mid-card titles. The TNT title, the Continental title, the International title, and what the hell was the other one, bro? I already forgot. Oh, yeah, the FTW, but that's not really around anymore. They got rid of that. But either way, it's basically 4 belts that aren't that prestigious. They don't matter that much. And so Daniel Garcia winning the TNT title would have meant a lot more if all they had was the world title, the TNT title, and then a bunch of tag belts. But they don't. They have lots and lots of titles, and they don't mean anything. They're not over. And so the win is just not going to resonate. It's just not going to resonate the way they want it to. They worked hard, but again, the problem with this show is the guys went out there and worked hard, but I didn't care. I wasn't into it. Konosuke, Takeshita, and Ricochet. This match was very strange. This was a huge letdown. And I thought it was just me, but there were other people I was watching the show with who felt the same way. You've got Ricochet, who at one time was considered one of the best wrestlers in the entire world in like 2016, 2017, when he was on the come up with Will Ospreay. And then you've got Takeshita, who has had a really good past couple years. He's on his way. He's the international champion. But the match just, I don't know what happened, but it felt like it didn't connect. It just did not connect. And I wish I had a better explanation for you. I don't know if it was just poorly put together or there might have been a communication issue, but this is not the match that I was expecting. Last month at Wrestle Dream, there was a three-way with these two and Will Ospreay, and that was phenomenal. And usually, one-on-one matches are usually less chaotic than three-ways because they're easier to put together. And they didn't put a great one together here. And I think also some of the problems with this show is that the match order was very strange, and some matches should have been on earlier. Like, I think this match could have opened the show, in my opinion. It didn't connect. And again, Konosuke won. But Don Callis' group is continuing to get wins. Bobby Lashley and Swerve Strickland. Another match that I thought was a strangely booked match. So Bobby Lashley comes out there and starts dominating him. Like the first maybe 6, 7, 8 minutes was all Bobby Lashley just like destroying him, with Strickland making like some comebacks here and there, some hope spots here and there. Then Bobby Lashley would take him down. Then there was a moment where Strickland started getting like momentum, like he started to pick up the pace and get some moves in on Lashley. And I'm like, okay, this is becoming more of a seesaw matchup. But by the time it had gotten there, it just felt like Strickland was just getting destroyed. There was some interference because like Shelton Benjamin tried to help Bobby Lashley, so it wasn't a totally clean finish. But it wound up with Bobby Lashley putting Swerve in the Hurt Lock or the Full Nelson, and Swerve passed out. Now this match, I was very intrigued in this match because it's one of those matches that neither guy can really lose, because Swerve is coming back from his whole thing with Hangman and that needle thing they did at All Out that blew off that feud. And so I was wondering if they were going to have him lose again, because I feel like the guy who should be going after Moxley is Swerve Strickland. I don't think Darby Allin is, I don't think he's world champion material, but Strickland is, without question. He had a great title run this year. It was cut short to give Bryan Danielson his moment, and I was happy about that, but I thought, okay, he's got to get that belt back. And I feel like he should be the guy to beat Moxley. He should be the guy to represent AEW, not Darby Allin. But they're going with Darby, and I don't know when Strickland will be champion again. But he's a guy who he's the whole package. He's a big guy, tons of charisma, well-liked, has great matches with anybody of all shapes and sizes. That's a guy who I think is a world champion. Darby Allin, to me, it does not look credible. I mean, this guy, at Revolution 2022, this almost happened on camera. They're brawling around ringside, and he comes up to me. You can hear me on the broadcast, too, clearly. And he almost like shoulder bumps me because he goes, "Get out of the way, man." Because I wasn't in the way, but he was going to do a spot or whatever, and I didn't feel any weight. He's a small guy. He's a small, kind of lanky guy, and it's hard to buy him as a credible world champion. Maybe I'm the one who's too old school, but Strickland to me is every bit the wrestler Darby is, if not better and safer, especially with the stuff that Darby does. And Darby can be like the Mikey Whipwreck of the company. And yes, Mikey Whipwreck was ECW champion, but that's probably where TK's getting the idea from. But he can be like the sort of like the guy that everybody sympathizes with and wants to do well, but isn't the world champion. I think Strickland would make a better world champion. I think he needs another run, because that first run was great and he deserves another one. But he lost here. So the Lashley push begins. So now we've got the Don Callis group. We've got the Elite, who aren't around that much, but they're still around. We've got Moxley's group, and we've got the the MVP group, so the Hurt Syndicate. So that's 4 heel stables. Probably more than that. Also, they had a really weird segment with Mira Shirakawa and Mariah May that's going to lead to a match. And it looked like they did this bump where they went off the stage, and it looked like Shirakawa lost a tooth. Weird. And the table didn't break either, so it was a strange spot. And I guess it's building up to a match between them. But again, like I really like Mariah May as a character and as a heel world champion. It's weird she wasn't on this show. I mean, wrestling. But I don't care. I'm not that into AEW right now, and they haven't really given me a reason to care. Then we have the main event, Jon Moxley and Orange Cassidy. Orange Cassidy opens the match by going right after Mox, and I'm happy about that. They start brawling around ringside. There's blood. Typical Mox match. There were things about this match that I enjoyed. The David and Goliath story was well done, I think. Orange Cassidy has no credibility with me as a credible champion because he's basically an undercard comedy character. I know some folks love the guy, and I'm not saying he's a bad worker at all. He is a good worker. But the hand in the pockets thing and little kicks, like, that can work in Shikara or in DDT Pro, but on a big, that's not like Jim Cornette, but it's true. On a big, like, number 2 promotion that's worldwide, it doesn't work as well. It's a very niche gimmick. It works for a very small audience. And what pissed me off about it is I thought that for this match, he would suspend that. He would just go in there and try to win. There's a spot in the match where he starts doing the stupid fake kicks and Mox is looking at him. And I'm like, you have ruined the match with that. Because here's the issue. The story of the match is that it's this violent, brutal match between this angry world champion who has a chip on his shoulder, Jon Moxley, and Orange Cassidy, who wants to defend AEW, become the world champion and overthrow him. And in the middle of the match, he starts doing the goofy fake kicks and the hands in the pockets. Like, are you nuts? Are you nuts? Like, you're breaking the realism. If it was an undercard, like, tag team comedy match, that's one thing. This is a world heavyweight title match. And he's putting his hands in his pockets and doing the gimmick. I don't understand, man. I don't understand. Like, I know some fans like this. I know some of the AEW diehards eat this shit up, but it's like, dude, Darby Allin's character needs to evolve, and I thought they've had many opportunities to, not Darby Allin, Orange Cassidy, I'm sorry. Orange Cassidy, well, Darby too, but Orange Cassidy's character needs to evolve. They've had so many chances to do it, and they fuck it up every time because he goes back to the well again with the pockets thing. And it's just, dude, Mox is trying to make, Moxley's whole thing is he's trying to make himself this sort of badass, unstoppable world champion, just a guy who will do anything for a win, surrounding himself with all these dangerous guys. And you're doing an undercard comedy gimmick in a world title match. It's mind-boggling to me, dude. Like, it's mind-boggling. Then the post-match. So Mox wins because there was some interference. There was a lot of people came out, like Willow Nightingale attacked Marina Shafir. Some of Orange's friends came out, like Rocky Romero, Ishii. And Wheeler Yuta basically screws Orange over. He gets hit with the Death Rider and gets pinned 1, 2, 3. Mox retains. Then things get even more weird. So Hangman Page comes out and he confronts Mox. And they're talking about how these guys had a really bloody feud. And they did. The Hangman Mox feud from last year that started when Mox knocked out Hangman as a shoot on television on accident in 2022. It was a good feud. I liked it a lot. And so they're teasing that they're going to fight, and I'm thinking they're going to join forces. But that didn't happen either. Christian comes out, and he wants to cash in on Moxley now. And then Hangman lets him cash in, but then Jay White comes out and screws Christian. So are they building to Jay White versus Christian? I mean, they did the tag match on Dynamite, or are they building to Mox versus Hangman? Like, I'm so confused. And I had like 7 people I was watching this with, and nobody had a damn clue what was going on. Then the Death Riders carry Mox out to the back with the championship. Jay White's looking like an idiot in the ring, like, yeah, I got you. I don't know why Jay White would even bother with Christian. I don't get it. Maybe I missed something. And they're about to leave, and then the Darby Allin spot happens where he rams the car into him. He comes out of the car, he's bleeding, and he's mad, and he's yelling at Mox, who drove away in another car. So again, they're building to Darby overthrowing Moxley. But the show is a mess. They are trying to do stuff from Nitro, and it's not working. This is all stuff we've seen before on WCW Nitro during the Monday Night Wars era. And I did want a bit more unpredictability in AEW. I did want a bit more of the show feeling spontaneous. But this ain't it. This is not it. They don't have the right guys there to do that with. Unfortunately, Jon Moxley is not on the level. This is going to piss some people off, but he's not on the level of the NWO. The NWO was a real drawing card. AEW is still not drawing fans to the arenas. And Darby Allin is not Sting. He's just not. They're trying to mimic that story and add a bit more violence to it. It's more of a gory version of the story, but it just comes off weird. We don't even know what Hangman wanted out there, and I guess it's all being done to tease like Dynamite, but the problem is that I don't care. And the crowd was sitting there very confused. It wasn't just me. People were watching this in the crowd and didn't understand how to take it. Nobody got it. This is, I can't say it's the worst AEW pay-per-view. I can't say that because there's been a few other ones that are pretty bad. I have to think about this, but I will say it's one of the strangest AEW pay-per-views ever. This show was straight up weird. And I hope it's an anomaly. I hope that when we get to World's End, we'll have a better, more focused pay-per-view. But this was all over the place, man. It really was. I don't think there's anything that's really worth going out of your way to see. Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher, maybe. Hangman, Jay White, maybe. But, and I'm going to say something else, too, that I'm kind of sick of, man. These Mox matches where he hits you and then you hit him back and then they're hitting each other with the elbows. They're trying to copy Misawa from the 90s, but the difference is that Misawa was more aggressive and was trying to win. Mox is hitting Orange Cassidy saying, come on, hit me back. And he does it like all the time. And all you're doing is cutting his balls off. All you're doing is telling the world, this guy can't hit as hard as I do. And then Mox would hit him and he'd go down and take a bump. So all you're doing is cutting his nuts off, bro. Like, it's such a weird, like, they gotta stop that shit. It's a thing that every AEW match has. The dives, the you hit me, I hit you. Like, they really need to overhaul this entire product. It needs to be completely overhauled because it's not working right now, man. It's not working. I think the bloom is off the rose. And I wish I could say I'm the only one, but I'm not. I was talking to people from all over the place. Different ages, different, like, backgrounds. Even day one AEW fans who did not know what the hell this was. It was strange. I think TK has a bit of an identity crisis. I think he wants to make AEW, obviously, he wants it to draw as well as it can and be a successful business, but I don't think he really knows how. So he's trying these things that have worked in the past, but he's not effectively executing them. And I don't even know where this Death Rider story is going, because if it's just going to end with Darby beating Moxley, I think that's somewhat underwhelming. Am I crazy? If you think I am, let me know in the comments, dude. I don't know. I didn't feel this one. I didn't feel it. Those are my thoughts.